for sure. Um, so just to remind people, welcome all. Just remind people kind of what we talked about. I guess 2 meetings ago, and last meeting as well. We kind of went over it too, but we reviewed some of the top level events. And we chatted with oh shoot, what is his name now? Um, the medical device guy. His name escapes me at this moment, but
Christopher Gates.
yes, Christopher Gates. Yeah, we had a chat with Christopher Gates at the end, reviewing end of guaranteed support, and the result from that was essentially that it's potentially not necessary for end of guaranteed support to be a top level event, and we can represent these different sorts of support levels in just our support object, I think. So that was kind of that's kind of what I got from it. And so I tweaked kind of the wording a little bit around these events. And I also removed end of guaranteed support. And but I think we still had some things to potentially review here. One is end of marketing. And if I can just pull up also potentially the meeting notes. Let me share my screen here.
Yeah, and I think I've only missed one meeting, right? The last one.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, that's right. And so if I can pull up the meeting notes. Yes, there's two things I think that Jordan wanted to talk about still, which is end of marketing and superseded by. And then also this question that you had, end of support versus end of life. I tried to add some more kind of explanations in the spec, so maybe we could review that and see if that makes sense. But yeah, maybe Jordan, take it away, I suppose.
Yeah.
Wherever you want to
So
start.
I guess end of marketing, right? So I think we brought this up 2 meetings ago, and I'm trying to remember what was talked about, but like I don't understand why that's something that tells you anything useful. Because if it's in an industry where there's legal requirements or contractual requirements around support, you know that that's like external knowledge you have, and you can infer those dates with that knowledge combined with what's in the spec. But like when somebody stops marketing something like that,
Mhm.
you might be able to assume that that means that it will go end of life at some point, but like you can't necessarily assume that. Maybe they just cut their marketing budget. You know what I mean? Like, and so the only way you could know that is if you had external knowledge. And I feel like, and the end of marketing is going to be an event that the vendor has to produce. So I guess if they know that they're planning to end of life something, then they would make that event a future end of life date or end of support date or whatever's appropriate. But like, why is the internal decisions of their marketing team relevant externally? I'm still trying to get my head around that.
Typically, it's a leading indicator.
Hmm.
Like if a company is acquiring another company,
Right, that was what
typically,
you mentioned. Uh-huh.
yeah. So there's my employer, others do this all the time. We acquire a company and we stop all the marketing on the intellectual property that was just acquired. It usually takes a fair amount of time to figure out how you're going to assimilate this technology into your own. So you
Hmm.
can't necessarily say, well, I'm going to end of life it this date because one, you haven't really looked at the technology yet, nor have you
Right.
had time to look at the contracts yet. So the end of marketing is usually an early indicator to probably find something else.
But like, isn't one of the paths that the acquirer will continue to support the product moving forward, and that they would resume marketing? Like, it's not always the case that that an acquirer embraces, extends, and extinguishes. Like, often they do, in fact. Like Salesforce has acquired a bunch of companies like Heroku and stuff, that they continued. They probably evaluated that decision, but like, and maybe they did pause marketing. I don't know, but like, it's an ongoing concern, and that would have just created FUD. Like, an end of marketing event would have just created FUD and tried to convince people, oh, maybe we should move off Heroku. But until the company is ready to telegraph that they're closing it down, they probably don't want people moving off it, because that disrupts their revenue streams and stuff. So like, why would the company choose to provide that indicator? Like, in other words, I totally get the value as a consumer, why I might want to see a leading indicator that something might soon be, not be unsupported. But why would the producer ever want to
Well,
notify people of
think
that?
I think it's one of these things where it's not like the marketing department is going to take time out of what they're doing to make that assertion.
Right.
The premise is that this specification is going to be integrated with like CRM and all kinds of other systems, including the systems that do the marketing campaigns, so that this type of event would be automatable,
Yeah,
right?
I'm not
You're
asking
never
about the
going
effort
to,
required. I'm asking, um, why would they want that information communicated externally ever?
yeah,
I think, oh, could I jump in real quick? I think it gets to, there's kind of a broader point here of the events that we include in CLE. Are they for always a very specific goal, or are they just general events that you might want to surface to a consumer about, like what's the threshold basically in which
Well,
we would add an
mm,
event? The ones that we have now, I think, are generally very clear. Like
yeah.
usually it's typically for software support. You want to find support information
Hmm.
for a piece of software and a specific version. So um, yeah, that's kind of just a
Yeah, I mean,
broader point there.
I think the other thing we have to think of, and keep in our heads, is what information does the consumer want, and what information will the producer want to produce? And
Right.
and there will be times, primarily when the producer vanishes for whatever
Hmm.
reasons, when consumers will want to annotate, make a claim that maybe externally someone might want to say, oh, it looks like marketing has ceased, for example. um it's the but that's when the producer's like gone. If the producer's still there, then like they get to decide that messaging. And it's very clear, I think, why someone would want to produce information about something being unsupported, because they don't want to have to they don't want to bear the support burden after that point, and they want their customers to migrate somewhere, right, to a new version or an alternative product or whatever. So everything related to support, right? Like, the producer wants to communicate that, and the consumer wants to know it. So that's perfect, right?
Yeah.
But end of marketing, like, it's clear that, and thank you for reminding me, Steve, because we talked about this 2 meetings ago. It's clear why the consumer might want to know that, but I don't see any reason why any producer would ever want that information leaked. Like, I would think that they would see that as a bad thing if they're not if they're ready to scare people away from using a product. They would announce a migration plan or a sunset plan or an end of life date or end of support date. And if they're not ready, they would absolutely not want to tell people anything that might make them think that.
yeah, I'm not going to assume how people will actually use the spec. I've primarily worked for software companies, with a few
Hmm.
exceptions. Primarily worked for software companies all my life,
Hmm.
so I'm not going to presume how people will use the spec. Obviously, with folks that have done specification work, it's really interesting um, how people use specifications in ways that you never envisioned.
Sure.
So just because I, you know, don't have a lot of assumptions on how this could be useful, somebody from a completely different perspective would be very obvious to them.
Hmm.
I think one another example might be, you know, say for example, you've got two almost competing product lines, right?
Mhm.
You've acquired somebody, you're continuing to sell both of these things, but technically they're
Yeah.
competing against one another. You might want to signal to your potential customers that here is my end of marketing date, here is my end of sale date, and here is my my superseded by date, right? Um, so in terms of a migration path, you could theoretically provide that to consumers in a very easy to understand way. So you're not saying superseded
Mhm.
by, you're actually saying this is when I'm going to supersede it with. So you're giving the consumer, hey, I'm going
Yeah,
to
yeah.
stop marketing, I'm going to start sales, I'm going to stop, you know, whatever. So it's a very clear migration path. That might be really useful.
Will each of those pieces ever be independent? Like in
Well, they
this
might
the
have
scenario,
different dates.
of course, but the
Yeah.
scenarios you're describing, it sounds like the full plan will have been thought out and decided. It could change, of course. There's facilities for that, but like someone will have all three of those dates at once, and it's totally great to come up with a way to for a producer to communicate that. The end of marketing on its own is what was confusing me, combined with an end of support or end of life date, whether it includes migration options or not.
Gotcha.
That's perfectly clear to me. But what that tells me then is that it should not be possible to provide an end of marketing date by itself because it doesn't make sense. And I totally agree with you that uh, any API or spec can be used in unexpected ways, and sometimes that's good and sometimes that's bad, and you can't control or plan for either one. But but that's why I think it's better, like it's better for us to err on the side of under supporting unknown use cases, because then they can tell us and we can extend it. And as long as we've thought about the possibility and not designed ourselves into a corner, or as long as we can come up with an alternative design and use versioning to migrate, then like it's okay. Right. So it's like,
Does
I
the
guess, yeah, go ahead.
do the FDA requirements have requirements on end of marketing? I can't
That's a good
remember.
question. But also like based on what we've talked about scope constraints, right? Like is FDA related products are something that we absolutely eventually want our spec to support, but doesn't necessarily have to be fully uh, you know, supported in the first version. Like I don't want to like scope creep essentially and make it bigger than it needs to be. I'd rather come up with a new standard every 6 months and have and then in version 4 or whatever, it covers all the things that we've talked about. But like I'd rather that than not have a version 1 this year. You know?
Well, I don't think not including of an event would, or including an event would take that much longer. Right?
It may not, but like I think
If the FDA, I read very, very slow, so
oh
I
sure,
haven't
take your
been
time.
able to follow. I haven't been able to follow the screen
Oh,
share.
sorry.
But if the FDA actually requires it, I would like to include it.
Okay.
If they do not explicitly require it, I think maybe that's something we can put on the back burner.
Hmm. Okay. Yeah,
Okay,
and also like
let me
go
look that
ahead,
up.
Benji.
I'll look that up out of band
Okay. Cool.
Okay.
for this. Yeah.
Yeah. And also like we must have by October 1 basically something to send to Ecma if we want to make
Yes.
um the Ecma GA in December after the patent RF opt-out period. So I am going to be much less nervous about scope creep and adding stuff if on July 1st we have that document. Cool. Then we got 3 months to stuff in everything else we want. Like I'm super on board with that. I just really want to get to that point where we are able to pull the trigger as soon as possible. And like at that point, cool, as big as you want, right? Like
Got it.
that's just so you understand where my mind's coming from. Obviously, it's not any one of us' lone decision, but like that's where I'm coming from philosophically. Is like I want us to get to a something we could send to Ecma as fast as possible, and once we're there, like go nuts.
Got it. Okay, no, that makes a lot of sense. All right, let's find out whether or not the FTA does it.
Cool.
And then we will prioritize it accordingly, keeping in mind the time frame. Now, I've always been saying September, but you're saying October. I was always giving us a
September's
little
better.
bit more cushion, right?
Totally. Yeah. I think it's a 60-day opt-out period, and the GA meeting is going to be sometime in December, but sometimes it's like the 5th. So like,
Yeah.
yeah,
And
more cushion
usually
is
the
better.
Excacom usually wants it like a month in advance or something like that, right?
I think that's true. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, then September 1, perfect. I love that. Yeah, like I said, once we have something submittable, the pressure's off. And also the other thing that just as a side note, possibly as a result to me, Benji and my's prodding, OpenEOX has released something, a white paper that I haven't
Yeah.
looked at yet. I haven't had the time to like really dive into something like that, but it would behoove us to have some of us take a look at it and see if there's anything in it that we're missing, and if there's anything in it, anything we need to do to be interoperable. I want us to still have our own standard. I think OpenEOX is a very obscure, like looking into it, it's like a very obscure standards body and process, and it's like not clear how to join. And other than some of the big players that they have, like not a lot of companies are going to be in it, whereas Ecma is a much larger like roof. And so I still would want both standards to exist, but I think it's pretty important that, just like with SPDX and Cyclone, right, that like most things can support both formats, right? I'd like that to be the case for this.
Yeah.
It
Yeah,
makes
I
sense.
agree.
I noted that down.
Awesome. Okay,
We
so
can
that
definitely take a look at that.
is end of marketing, and then superseded by. Is that specifically when it's like pointing to a different Perl? Because like, so my question on the PR was like every new version supersedes the previous one. Like that's just how versions work.
It's kind of like a point of the okay. Imagine someone is using. I can see an example of someone's using like I don't know, a non-Semver version or something
Okay.
like that. And you have just names of releases, for example. So you
Okay.
can point from one release to another, and it's not immediately clear because there's no increasing number to say
I guess
that
that's
this is
true.
a
And Calver
you
would
know
be the same because you like, I mean, I guess Calver, you can imply it from the dates.
yeah.
I have a little list of all the versioning systems that I know of so far.
I haven't even heard of that before. So
Oh, I've got like 10. Calver is calendar versions. Like you put like the
okay,
date.
yeah.
Romver, romantic versioning. There's Fibonacci versioning. There's a whole bunch.
The
And then,
insanity.
yeah, right. Okay,
Oh,
so
this one quick one there.
go for it.
Could you send me that list? Because I've been looking for stuff like that, and
Yeah.
I actually registered a few months ago. Not decware, which would be decremental versioning, but deciver, which sounds bad, but it's the one we are using in the CPAN and Perl ecosystem, which is decimal versioning, which is also another alternative. So that website I'm hoping to put up eventually. So
Okay, cool.
I'll offer that to your collection. But I want your.
I'll add that to my list. Yeah, I actually want to make a listing of all these things, like a GitHub repo or something.
Thank you.
But yeah, I think everything I have that's real is on that blog post.
For the
and some of the things I have are not real. They're just like funny tweets.
Yeah. For the superseded
Yeah.
stuff, I understand the version. I think that's very simple.
Mhm.
I'm more interested in because as Jordan was saying, a lot of not all the time, but a lot of times it's kind of obvious.
Yeah.
I'm more interested in superseded by another product.
Yeah, I think superseded by then is something that we should clearly note in pros. For example, in Semver, this event should never really exist
Right.
unless a Perl is provided. right? Like it should
Yeah.
not exist for the same product. And then we need to add an optional field here that points you to another Perl. And so, and then similarly, there's a versions, and I think that can just be one field, right? Because you can have ranges in there.
Mhm.
Right.
So it would be type superseded by effective date, version field, like new version or whatever you want to call it. As superseded by version is a little wordy, but whatever. The various timestamps, and then optional target Perl.
Mhm.
Yeah, that seems reasonable. I hadn't even thought about alternative version systems because I'm so mired in Semver.
Well, you guys are trying
Oh, they
to
exist.
to do like a Semver 2.1 or something, aren't you? Or
Um,
whatever that is.
Well, yeah. So I have there's two open PRs on the Semver spec, and as soon as I have the time, which has been years and I haven't, but I have a task from some of the Semver spec maintainers to rewrite the Semver spec and include those two PRs, and that would be a version 3. Essentially what it would do is make the Semver spec be what NPM has always done. Which is like more precise for version 0 versions and includes ranges and stuff. And it's a little more complicated because it has to also ideally work for ecosystems that aren't NPM, like bundler and stuff like that. But I think the range work, I think a lot of that's already been done in the PR. And I wrote the V0 PR, so I can handle that one. But yeah, it's just
Cool. All right.
one of the things that doesn't fit on my plate, but but I do want to do it.
24 hours in a day.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm good with superseded by then with those tweaks and given that context.
Okay.
And
Can
we
you
should, yeah.
say those tweaks one more time? So the
Okay,
one is
so
the we
a
should
pros
definitely
note,
note that, yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Pros note.
So a pros note that's like that indicates that this should only exist without a Perl or with
Yeah.
without the X field, whatever we call that field, in an ecosystem where version progression is not implicit.
Mm-hmm.
For example, in the so, yeah, we should mention Semver as something that's excluded from that bucket, like
Mm-hmm.
somehow. Okay, and then instead of a versions field or array, we should just have a version. Right? Like that change everywhere, right? Like because it could be one version or a range or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And it's fine if we want it to be an array of those things too, but I don't know. And
Yeah.
then it should still have superseded by version and published and modified and effective, but then we need to add an optional field that is whatever we call it, X, that is
Mm-hmm.
an alternative Perl to point to.
Okay.
Because even in a Semver ecosystem, for example, you would want superseded by if you're trying to point people to a new package.
Yeah.
And that's different than component renamed, because it might renamed is sort of like the project has been forked to a different name and the old one's dead. It's like there's like a semantic difference there. I suppose we could combine
Yeah.
the two and say have an extra optional Boolean or something that says like this is a renaming, and maybe that's simpler. I don't know, but they're semantically different enough that I think we don't have to do that. It just might be nice if it makes sense.
Yeah. Makes sense. And identifiers, perhaps something like this.
Yeah. Like, and there's like the renamed has like references and yeah, exactly. Whatever. I haven't paged it in my head, but whatever we need to be able to point at a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's fine if I think I always like it when these things have very unambiguous multiple formats where it's like you can do a simple string or you can do an array of strings or you can do an object or an array of objects. And it's like, and that gives, so then you can write the smallest possible form, but also expand it. But that's my personal preference. I don't know if everyone will share that.
Mm-hmm.
And then the only other thing that I had a question on, I think, is you added that the support policy should not include third-party support policies or options.
Yes. So I think I need to tweak the wording there, but I was trying to say that it shouldn't, like, okay, let's say it's a component created by Microsoft
Mhm.
And the support array, I don't think should include an option by, for example, maybe Red Hat or something like that. Maybe Red Hat offers support for this component that Microsoft creates. You know what I mean?
So it like for the events that Microsoft produces, they're probably not
Yes.
going to list Red Hat,
Hmm.
right?
Yes.
So for that category, there needs to be a way, I
Hmm.
think, in this spec for somebody to be able to programmatically determine that Red Hat offers support for that product.
Hmm.
But obviously, in the case where they're not partners, the vendor
Yeah.
isn't going to mention that. Okay.
Yeah.
The second wrinkle is, what if Microsoft is partners with someone, right? Company
Hmm.
X, and that
Yeah.
is an official endorsed relationship. Then Microsoft
Yes.
should be able to mention that. And it doesn't have to be in the same list. Like, I don't care where but like, that's
Hmm.
something I would want to programmatically determine is, does this product have endorsed or blessed third-party options? Yes or no?
Hmm.
What are they? And then
Hmm.
what are the unofficial third-party options,
Mm.
which I would be getting from somewhere else?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. I think that makes sense. I don't know the best way of representing that. It's like
Yeah,
an external option that's not from the, yeah,
right.
from the producer, but
Well, and something we talked about early on was that, like,
yeah.
the idea that we need to have a way for the maintainer slash vendor slash owner, whatever, the authority,
Hmm. Hmm.
to make claims that are implicitly trusted about their product,
Hmm.
and for any rando to be able to
Hmm.
make a claim about the product as well that may contradict it. And
Hmm.
we need to come up with some workflow or
Hmm.
process where that makes sense, and you sort of need some sort of registry for that. So that could just be, cool, we'll just put up someone puts up a GitHub repo, and everyone starts throwing in their attestation, their claims, and then,
Hmm.
like, you can choose to accept those or not, or, I don't know. But, like,
Hmm.
we have to at least have a story for how somebody will do those things. And I would say, once we have that story, then that's the answer to the question for the unofficial ones, is they just say, here's third party support from here. And then, like, we know that this is from the official source and this is not.
Mm.
And then you
There's
can choose to trust it or not. Go ahead, Steve.
there's also a need for a similar type of thing in the sustainability work that Salve and I are working on. So if
Okay.
we can, if there's an opportunity to figure out specification wise, and it doesn't have to be like a 1.0, but
Mhm.
if we can find a way to do it in the specification wise, and do it in a way that meets not only CLE's needs but meets their needs as well, we could
Yeah.
have that capability common across two different specifications.
Yeah, it sounds great. I mean, one
Hmm.
one easy answer is, uh but not complete, is URLs, right? Is just the 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 software itself lists the authoritative URL for CLE events and sustainability events, whatever it is, and then you just have to know what the other alternative URLs are, and you can pull from there. Um, that doesn't entirely, without a registry of some kind to point people at, that doesn't really handle discovery. But if we can find a way to handle discovery, then I think that's the answer. Is, you just, like, I'm the publisher of a software project, I just say, yeah, here's the official list of CLE events, look at that. And then there's some other place that everyone knows to look at where they can find unofficial ones too. And
Yeah.
implicitly, like, programmatically, you can differentiate, then these are the official events, these are not.
Right.
Um,
Right.
Yeah.
but,
And that
like,
actually,
yeah, go ahead.
yes, I guess one other thing we might want to include in these support fields is actually a URL.
Mhm.
You just made me think of that, but it'd be useful to like tie back to a page that describes the support policy in more detail, right?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah.
I mean, and that could even just be a generic contact page, but, like, a place where you have the opportunity to find more information.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
But no, I generally agree with adding some sort of non-primary page, but not making claims on behalf of someone necessarily. It's like, yeah.
Yeah. And
Cool.
like, I don't think that we should try and specify how to determine the viability, or the correctness of those claims. Like we should entirely leave that to, userland until there's some dominant models for it. But
Yeah.
I do want to be able to provide enough information that someone could then make that determination for themselves.
Yeah. Makes sense.
The use case Steve just had in mind, and from the sustainability working group, was when a second party, like an ecosystem or distribution channel, knows something about the project's situation and would like to share it downstream with the user. Say, for example, the maintainer has passed away, for example, or something like that. So but in that case, the maybe the project itself doesn't know, or it hasn't even thought about that there might be a legitimate claim coming from that direction. So in a sense, if we go this try to find a way to add this, and it kind of has to be able to be used in either case, both as an independent claim and as a, let's call it a well-known claim or something like that, or an authorized claim.
Yeah, and similarly speaking, I also think that it would be valuable to include a mechanism for people to vouch for another claim, to be able to not just to duplicate the claim, but to be able to say, whoever I am, I agree with this claim, or I disagree with it.
That would be wonderful. That would be
right, because then we have a sort of built-in self-correction system of like, if enough people that are known quantities vouch for a thing, then that's the thing, right? In the absence of an official, statement.
Now we're getting into like blockchain consensus algorithms and stuff.
No.
But yeah, I mean, honestly, like there are some similarities. Not that I think we should go in that direction, but like
Yes.
This is something where there is an authority, and there is a need in the absence of an authoritative statement for a consensus to form.
Yes.
And for people to be able to determine their own criteria for that consensus.
Yeah. I had I added this to the spec. I wanted to get some feedback on it, I suppose, as well. Just the added like types of work. And I thought it would kind of make it easier in explaining some of the events. Like, I don't know if these are types of work that you can generalize across essentially all software projects, but we're using them.
Changes.
That. Give me an example.
Like like feature development is new features or functionality. Maybe I just rewrote it and dropped bloat, and it works. Change the API, right? Like that's not really new features or functionality. It is a significant change, right?
Yes.
Like, I don't know if you want to use the word major or breaking because of the Semper connotation, but like some
Yes.
category that includes those things, I think, is commonly associated.
Interesting. Yeah, like major changes.
Yeah.
Or something similar.
Yeah, like, I mean, Windows, like, I don't know, 7 to 8 is not quite any of these categories, right? It's more of a significant release.
And the Cyber Resilience Act, they operate with the term substantial change.
Perfect.
Interesting. That sounds good.
Yeah, that sounds great.
And then we can include feature development, perhaps, as is included as an example of a substantial change.
Yeah, like you can have feature development that's not substantial, and you can have substantial change without feature development, and you can have substantial change with feature development.
Yeah.
And like the substantial change can include bug fixes or security fixes also. So
Well,
Yes.
sorry, correction. There's the wording in the cyber resilience actually says is substantial modification. So if you want
okay.
same
Yeah, might as-
phrasing, that's actually
yeah, same semantics. Let's just use their phrasing.
Do you know what page that is or section of the
where
cyber resilience?
yeah, you should look at recital 41 mentions it.
Yeah.
I can give you a link. Or you do you have a link, maybe? I have notes. I have taken notes. Let's see if I can also open the chat to share some of these links with you.
Okay. Yeah, I'll take a look through all that terminology that they have there. See if I can find some commonality. But essentially, this is not really using it in the spec other than to describe the type of events, really. So,
Yeah.
you know, for
Yeah,
example, like end
not
of development is when they
Mhm.
see that when you see, I guess in our case, substantial modifications for a specific version or version range. These type of events will continue, right? Until end of support. So I'm trying to kind of group these types of works so it makes it a
end
little
of
easier to
development then
understand.
is like LTS for a lot of software projects.
Yes.
Perfect.
Yes. And then we have end of support.
We should probably eventually add more wording around stuff like that, so we can say like, here's some examples that would, where this event would be a product, like the node project has gone, node 18 goes into LTS, that would be an end of development event, like stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And then after end of development, we have then end of support, right? End of support is no more security fixes for a specific version or version range. And then finally, end of life, which I think Jordan had a comment, the difference between end of life and end of support. And so does the explanation here make sense between these for everyone as well, I suppose?
Yeah, I mean so documentation and maintenance, like hold on, let me go up and read maintenance. Maintenance isn't listed under types of work. So what does that mean?
Did I not include it? Let me see. Ah, you're right. You're correct.
But like except for distribution,
Yeah.
all of those things are implied to me by end of support. You don't fix documentation either, right? Like, not
Yeah.
really. And most things, like other than the Apache Foundation, nobody has this like, irrevocable freeze. Like you can go back and fix documentation anytime you want without having to imply supporting it. But like that's sort of separate. Distribution, like if you are publishing to a public registry, you do not control distribution. And but that's really only relevant if you're distributing it yourself. So I understand there are places where that's the case, like even a Go, module or whatever it would be called. If you delete the repo, you're not distributing it anymore, right? Or make it private or something. So like that part makes sense, but like for any NPM package, I don't see any difference between end of support and end of life. And it would be weird to try and have to make two events to make sure I'm catching everything.
Maybe we can clarify the distribution aspect. I think that's the one likely hang up.
Yeah, because if it was end of distribution, that makes sense, because then anything published to a registry never has one of those events. And anything that needs to specify that will have end of distribution, and end of support is, and in that case, I would call what's currently end of support, I would call that end of life. And what's currently end of life, I would call end of distribution.
Because I think we need an EOL. We definitely need an EOL.
But things the way
But-
everyone understands EOL, lots of stuff on NPM is EOL, but you can still get it forever. End of life doesn't imply that you can no longer get it.
Mm-hmm.
Correct. So we
So
have
that's
the
why I'm
end of
saying
support.
we should have end of life. But like, what's the difference other than distribution? What's the difference between end of support and end of life for you, Steve?
Well,
Well,
so
the end of life is, I'm looking at it from a commercial standpoint.
Yes.
So, including the fact that we're not going to answer any emails regarding the product. And in a lot of cases, the entire staff that even knows about the product is gone.
Sure.
Right. So there's literally nobody there to support it at all or to answer questions or anything. From
But-
an NPM's perspective, I don't
Yeah.
think end of support would ever be used because most open source projects don't actually offer support in the traditional sense. They offer, best case scenario,
Best effort. Yeah.
best effort with pull requests and issues and stuff like that, but that's not support.
But if you're ceasing to provide security fixes and bug fixes, are you saying there's a case where you won't touch the software, but you'll still devote like human time to fixing people's problems, like directly with them, like helping them fix their own problems?
There are cases where you cannot compile the software anymore because the
Right.
tools no longer work.
Sure.
But you do have support contracts. You do have to help them on a commercial basis. So that's those
But that's a
scenarios
private
do exist.
contract that would supersede public events. Why does that? Like,
Well, they could be public. I mean,
no, but right. But I mean, private in the sense that like I can declare end of life
Contract.
and still have a support contract. Like it's always my choice to provide support if I want on a one-off basis.
End of life means that you're ceasing all activity, including support. So
Right.
the
But like,
support
but if someone
is-
shows up and offers $1 billion, you still might support it. Right.
which
Like,
is exactly the bootstrap example
Yeah.
that I said. This is why this specification is so important, because the open EOX folks, they really haven't thought a lot of through this, and
Right.
at least in a public way. But we need to be able to handle these cases, because you're right. If you throw enough money at something, sure, and that happens all the time. Not
Right.
just with open source, but primarily with commercial software. You throw enough money at the problem, and sure, they'll support it again.
But not necessarily for everyone else. Like Bootstrap is perhaps a unique example, but like Microsoft officially no longer supports Windows 2000, right? Or I don't even know if that's true, but let's say that's the case. And they don't even offer support contracts. But if the right person showed up with the right amount of money, they would suddenly do that. But that doesn't mean that doesn't change anything for anyone else. Nobody else is going to get Windows 2000 support unless they knock on the door with a big bag of money. So like, what's the value of an event around that?
I just want the big bag of money.
Totally. Yeah. That would be great. But that's what I'm trying to understand is like the primary purpose here is not, I think, to describe anything that could happen. The purpose is to describe events that the producer wants to communicate about, that the consumer wants to know about.
Yes.
And end of support, of course, is one of those things. Like whatever you want to call it. End of distribution is another one of those things. But
I would actually separate out, in my opinion, I would clarify the distribution on the end of life, because for open source, you actually don't have control over the distribution in a lot of cases.
Correct.
And the support makes sense. I do think there's room in the spec for end of distribution as its own thing.
Yeah.
And then I would reword the end of life, maybe to in commercial software, distribution is end of that's going to be that. I don't know. We'll have to figure out.
But like commercial
does
software could put out
distribution-
two events. They could put out end of life and end of distribution.
Right.
And they could also put end of life without end of distribution. I think that's okay.
Yeah.
Depends on how they're doing it. But like, but I'm still struggling to understand the need to differentiate end of support from end of life once we have a separate end of distribution.
Well, the end of support, I mean, keep in mind that we've got different support levels too.
Yeah.
So you might
totally.
have an end of support for one support level, but not another.
Ah, I see the support ID in here. So you're saying
Yes.
this is just the event to terminate a previously stated support policy.
Yes.
Yes.
So this would be the specific support level. So you
I
might have
see.
end of support for standard, and then
I
2
see. So
years
if I
later,
have-
you have it for extended.
So on an NPM package, if I have one support level,
Yeah.
then there really isn't a difference between end of support and end of life.
Right.
But if I have more
Yes.
than one support level, I could also do one for each of those end of support, or I could do end of life, and they mean the same thing.
Yes.
that right?
Let me see if I can.
Okay.
But I do
Um,
think we need to clarify the distribution.
Yeah. I mean, I think either as a distribution end date as an optional field or a separate end of distribution event, I think that probably will cover it, is my guess. We'll have to think that through. But so given that that makes sense now, I actually thank you. I understand the difference here. I'm thinking about if there is a way to combine these two events so that you can say, I am ending for these specific support IDs versus I'm ending it for all of them in the range.
We could make
right?
the support ID an array, so you could specify
That's what I'm thinking
one or
is
more.
we just have end of life. It has an optional support IDs field. If it's not present, it is presumed to mean all of them. And if it is present, then only the ones included are ended. And then and then we'll handle distribution either separately or as a field.
We'll still need the end of support event though.
Why? If end of life of one support ID conveys the same information, what's the semantic
the end
difference?
of life. Well, you're talking about the end of life of the actual product or version itself, and no more activity is happening. But support doesn't work that way. You can end one support, not
And
end
you might have
the
another.
others.
Right. Okay. So, but if I say I'm only end of lifing one of the two support levels.
But you don't end of life a support level.
Okay.
Is what I'm saying.
Semantic, yeah, I do agree with
I
Steve.
see what you're
I
saying.
think
It's
that
a
it is
semantic.
baked
Okay.
into the the term end of life.
Right.
Usually it means a complete kind of like, it's not for a specific support level. So
Okay,
if you look
then-
at this bootstrap example, for example, this example here, you have active LTS, you have maintenance LTS, and then they have an end of life date associated with
I
it.
see.
So the end of support for the maintenance LTS is equal to the end of life.
Right.
Object,
Okay. Okay. So let me back up then. We keep end of support. It has versions. It has, or whatever we're doing with the version field. It has support IDs as a required array.
Yes.
It can also be a string, I guess, string or array of strings. And the pros here can say there should only be an end of support event when the target product has more than one support level. And you can use should there. It's fine if you want to do that, but like that will make it more clear, I think, to people that unless you're doing fancy support stuff, which most open source isn't, that end of life is the event you want.
That makes sense to me. Yeah.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Okay. That's great. And then in end of life, you don't need a support IDs at all because it always means all of them. You do the same versions thing. Like I want the way we handle versioning should be the same with everything. Whether it's one version singular or plural or an array, I don't know. I haven't paged that in yet. And then separately, we'll handle distribution either by an end of distribution date optional field on end of life or by a new end of distribution event.
Yeah. I think that makes sense.
Yeah,
Cool.
that makes sense to me.
Okay. I like that. That's a lot of clarity.
Yeah. So
That's
end of
good.
support should only exist when you have the complicated support levels. If you just have one, you're using end of life.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
And the distribution date only exists if it's something where you control the distribution of it, which won't be the case for any open source with a registry.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Right.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
All right. I like clarity. This is
Yeah.
good.
No, this has been really productive. Okay.
May I throw some flies into the ointment here?
Oh!
Oh, no.
What
Yeah,
you
go
got,
ahead.
Solomon?
Okay, I'll just raise my my hobby horse or pet peeve around the types of support that come in the form of a security update. And there's a need, even after support time has ended or whatever support contract or terms are finished, that the security update needs to be kept available for a certain amount of time, even if strictly speaking, it's not supported anymore. How does this?
You're talking
fit
about
into here?
distribution, right?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So I think
But it's the distribution of the updates, not the product itself necessarily. That's where we talked about. That's the point I tried to add in a previous document around the.
Yeah, the CRA stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because there's still those requirements will still be around.
Is it safe to, like, could you basically say that updates are assumed to be, I guess there is a potential for someone to be like, I'm not distributing the product itself, but I am distributing just the updates. There is an edge case there I can see, I suppose, but generally, I don't know. Can we say generally here?
Well, I mean, in some cases, the updates will be patches, but in most cases, they will be the full product, won't they?
Yes.
Well, it kind of depends. So if the product is the software component of a product is an image that you flash a device with, then yes. But the requirement is also that you should be able to do quick updates, and it makes sense to have incremental patches to be applied, incremental security updates that don't just to replace the whole software stack or whatever, or the image.
Interesting.
And this is specifically to handle the situation where you are in a position to do a factory reset, even after support period has ended. And maybe even the product has been taken off the market. It's still there, and it still needs to have all its security updates reapplied after the factory reset.
Can we say, like, would it make sense to say an end of distribution that it includes releases and patches? I don't know.
I think that would be a shortcut that would create confusion. I'm one of those who likes clarity. So yeah. and using the same term to mean two different things is like not a big fan. With apologies about the flies.
No, that's fine. We're at the end of time. So, Solveig, do you think you could, on the PR or as an issue, write up the story of that we need to make sure that the spec covers?
Yeah, I think I actually added that already in the Google document.
Awesome.
This is based on. So.
Okay, cool.
I haven't checked if this was transferred to the GitHub account.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, either way, just call attention to it wherever it is, and then because I'd like to read it again when I'm a little more with it, and then we can brainstorm between now and the next meeting about how to address it. But it seems like once we address this, And once we've thought about a discovery for third-party claims and all that stuff, like I feel like that's what's left.
Yes.
is
However,
good.
I think there will be some flies
Fair
as
enough.
we actually try and do some sample use cases, like for Bootstrap, which I have here. We didn't actually get to it, but yeah, if you guys want to check it out or think about how we're going to add these events, you can do this on your own. For example, you can go to endoflife.date. You can pick a product. You can just like think, how would I actually represent this in the CLE? And then see if it actually makes sense.
Yeah,
But
I can go do
there's
that
definitely
for like
some.
Node.js and a few others.
Yes, that would be great. But we'll definitely run into some stuff. I already have run into some stuff that I want to talk about, but we didn't get to it
Cool.
this time. So
Next
I
time.
saw the Bootstrap example, by the way. So
yeah.
all right.
Yep.
All right, everyone.
And
Awesome.
yeah, Salvi, if you could just kind of summarize this, that would be really great. This
Okay,
I think that's
I'll
what
see
you're
what
talking
I
about,
can
right?
do. Yeah,
Yes.
that's the one.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, thanks,
All
everyone.
right.
All right.
Yes.
Cheers.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
See ya.
Bye.